It's Monday, May 18th, and time for your Barbados Today morning news update. The Barbados Workers Union raises concern about the increasing number of companies unilaterally slashing wages and salaries, and it's calling on the Ministry of Labour to intervene. The BWU's Director of Industrial Relations, Dwayne Paul, said companies have gone into survival mode as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and they are now handing down what he described as a prescription to unionized and non-unionized workers. Addressing the issue on the BWU's radio program Workers' Viewpoint yesterday, Paul made it clear that any cut to wages and salaries can only take place with the voluntary consent of workers.
The cutting of wages and salaries of workers is not legal unless you can get a firm agreement from workers that they are going to participate in such an activity. And that agreement cannot be one that is forced or coerced or any other way intimidated for it to be binding. That has to be something that is done totally voluntary in terms of them giving up part of their wage temporarily. However, the information coming to us indicates very much that this is not the case. Businesses seem to have drafted their survival plan, and part of that plan says they will cut salaries and wages, and people have received memos. People have gone to general meetings and be told that their wages will be cut and given an effective date. And just to indicate, the level of wages cuts out there range from between 5% to 50% of wages. And this goes against the Wages and Protection Act. The wages and salaries of Barbados are protected under the Wages and Protection Act. You do not have the right as an employer to go into your employees' wages and reduce them at your will and fancy, right?
He said the disturbing trend was occurring in several non-unionized companies.
We have large corporations who operate in professions like the legal fraternity in Barbados, and some of these legal firms have offices throughout the Caribbean. I have gone to their staff and told them they're taking 30% of their wages, they're taking 50% of their wages. We have in pharmaceutical companies telling for workers that they're going to take 30 and 50%. We have in construction, we have managers and supervisors going around trying to intimidate workers to take 5 and 10% cuts in their wages. And this is not with discussion. This is what we are doing. And we have a fundamental problem with it, and we are saying to workers, you do not have to agree. And where you are confronted with these situations, we want you to voice your concerns, because we have to raise this, because the government and the Ministry of Labour specifically has to address this matter. We cannot have persons being put in this situation.
The national count of COVID-19 cases in Barbados moves to 88 after 2 women tested positive for the viral illness. The two, aged 21 and 35, were both identified through contact tracing. Meantime, 1 person was scheduled to be released from isolation yesterday. 13 remain in isolation. 68 people have now recovered, and there have been 7 deaths. The Best dos Santos Public Health Laboratory has completed 3,924 tests since February 11. Meanwhile, the curfew imposed to limit the spread of the coronavirus has been extended until Sunday, May 31. It took effect at midnight last night and runs from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. daily. Under the curfew, only essential workers are allowed to leave their homes between those hours and have been advised that they should carry proof of employment at all times. The reminder comes as more businesses reopen their doors today under Phase 3 of government's plan. The Ministry of Education explains the July 14 date for the Common Entrance Examination. Over the weekend, Education Minister Santia Bradshaw announced the date and revealed that Class 4 students would also return to school from June 15. Speaking on the Current Affairs program, The People's Business, last night, Acting Chief Education Officer Joy Adamson said the decision was taken not only to ensure that necessary protocols were in place, but for students to get face-to-face teaching time as well.
We are following the guidelines from the Ministry of Health, we have to make sure that everything is in place. Schools were closed abruptly on March the 18th. And since that time, nobody would have really returned to the schools. So we have to make sure that the schools are clean. We have to make sure that it is safe. We have to make sure that protocols are in place, sanitizing stations are in place, and those things will obviously take time. So we know that some teachers, class 4 teachers, would have been interacting with their students using the online platform, but not all students were able to get on. So there are some students who will not have opportunity either because they didn't have a device or they didn't have Wi-Fi, that access. So therefore we would need them time. Normally when they go back into school for the Trinity term, they have a month before the exam. So we thought it only fair that we also afford them this same opportunity.
Another charity steps in to help vulnerable families during the coronavirus pandemic. Rivka Cares has been providing food boxes in different communities through its COVID-19 relief program. Committee member Rashana Horton told Barbados Today the program had donated to some 2,000 families so far.
Rivka Cares is a non-profit charity registered in the state of New York, in the United States, by a Barbadian called Rivka Nisha. She is a mother of 3, and she saw the situation as it was happening in Barbados and decided that she wanted to do something to help families with children especially. So we quickly assembled a task force to form a COVID-19 relief response. And so far, we have served close to 2,000 families in terms of being able to donate food vouchers, and this latest initiative, which is our food box relief program. We did 350 boxes on Mother's Day, and this weekend we're doing just about 320.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
To news from the region, there are currently no active cases of COVID-19 in Dominica. Prime Minister Roosevelt's Carrot made the announcement in an address to the nation last night, following negative tests from the last remaining active case. The number of confirmed cases remains at 16. However, the Prime Minister made it clear that the battle against COVID-19 was far from over.
But now is not the time to let our guard down. I know that the measures that we have had to take to secure the health and well-being of all persons in Dominica have restricted your freedoms. But this has been done for the protection of all of us. We must not become complacent and forget that this disease is extremely contagious and has claimed the lives of more than 300,000 people worldwide in a space of a few months. While we have no active case at the moment in Dominica, it is important that community testing be done to determine whether there is community transmission that has so far gone undetected. This is important as we move to ease restrictions even further.
On the international front, Japan has fallen into recession as the financial toll of the coronavirus continues to escalate. The world's third biggest economy shrank 3.4% in the first 3 months of 2020 compared to a year ago. More in this report from Reuters TV.
Japan's economy has fallen into recession for the first time in 4.5 years. That's according to GDP data from Monday. It puts the nation on course for its deepest post-war slump as the global health crisis takes a heavy toll on businesses and consumers. The world's third largest economy shrank 3.4% from January to March. It's the second straight quarter of decline. Residents were slammed by the double whammy of the health crisis and a sales tax hike from last October. The jobless rate in March rose to its highest in a year, while the availability of jobs slipped to a more than 3-year low. Japan's economy from April to June is expected to look far worse. Analysts polled by Reuters expect the economy to retreat by 22%, the biggest decline on record. In April, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe declared a nationwide state of emergency, keeping most people at home and shutting down many businesses. Japan's state of emergency was lifted for most regions on Thursday, but it's still in effect for some big cities, including Tokyo. The starkly negative outlook on Japan backs up fears the crisis could spark the worst global slump since the Great Depression.
That's news. But for the very latest, visit us at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook, and sign up for our breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media in bus terminals, as well as screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. And you can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM and Capital Media HD 99.3 FM.